Life requires for its wholeness not perfection, but completeness. We all wear it, some with elegance, others with desperation. The smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes, the polite tone that hides irritation, the practiced calmness we put on before walking into a room where we're expected to be composed, competent, in control. It's October now, and suddenly the world gives us permission to do openly what we do in secret every day, to wear a mask. The streets fill with monsters, witches, ghosts. Yet behind every costume there's something strikingly human, a silent sigh of relief. For one night, we don't have to be perfect. We can play, exaggerate, even be ugly. Halloween, in truth, is not a celebration of horror. It's a confession, a collective admission that beneath the surface, every one of us carries something darker, stranger, more real than what we allow others to see. Carl Jung once said that each of us carries a persona, a mask built to survive the social world. It's the version of ourselves we offer to others, so they will accept us, respect us, love us. It's not inherently bad. In fact, it's essential. The persona allows us to adapt, to find belonging, to navigate the fragile web of human connection. But Jung warned of a danger. When you forget that the mask is only a tool, it begins to consume you. You start mistaking performance for identity. You look in the mirror and see the reflection others want to see, not the one that lives behind your eyes. Think about how it happens. As children, we are born whole, spontaneous, radiant with possibility. But soon, we learn which parts of us draw affection and which provoke disappointment. The loud one is told to be quieter. The dreamer is urged to be practical. The sensitive one learns to hide tears. Little by little, we amputate fragments of our soul just to fit into the costume of what's acceptable. And each time we do, the self behind the mask grows fainter, whispering through our nights, "Remember me." Jung saw this split as one of the great spiritual diseases of modern humanity, the conflict between the true self and the performed self. He wrote that the persona is a system of relations between the individual and society, but when it hardens, it becomes a kind of armor that conceals the individual's true nature. What begins as protection turns into imprisonment. You wake up one day and realize you're living someone else's idea of your life. You smile when you're supposed to, nod at the right moments, meet every expectation, and yet inside you feel nothing. Only the echo of a voice that once belonged to you. That voice doesn't disappear. It retreats into the shadows, waiting for your silence. Sometimes it appears in your dreams, sometimes in the anxiety that grips you for no clear reason, sometimes in the inexplicable sadness that rises when you have everything you thought you wanted. It's the self trying to come home, and the more you suppress it, the more distorted it becomes. What we reject in ourselves doesn't die, it hides. It becomes a ghost that haunts our peace, the monster we project onto others, the darkness we fear in the world. So perhaps Halloween's true symbolism isn't about scaring others. It's about daring to meet the ghost within, to ask, what am I pretending not to know about myself? What have I buried beneath the polite smile, the job title, the endless need to appear fine? When Jung explored the persona, he wasn't condemning social masks. He was reminding us not to worship them. The mask should serve the soul, not silence it. As you move through the season of shadows, pay attention to what stirs in you when the lights dim and the noise fades. That faint discomfort, that ache of recognition. Is your deeper self knocking on the door? Beneath the layers of duty and image, something ancient in you is waiting, not to destroy who you become, but to remind you who you were before the world told you who to be. The invitation of this darkness is not destruction, it's revelation. To take off the mask, even for a moment, and breathe. To realize that what you feared all along is not the monster in the room. It's the part of you that still longs to be free. But what did Jung truly mean when he said that the persona can become a prison? In Jung's psychology, the persona isn't the enemy, it's the bridge. It's the thin, fragile layer between the wild interior world and the collective order outside. It's the mask we need to wear to survive the gaze of others, to belong without being devoured by judgment. Jung saw it as a part of the psyche that learns the rules of the social game and performs them well enough to stay in it. The teacher who becomes the calm one. The mother who never shows fatigue. The man who hides his tenderness behind competence. The friend who always listens but never speaks of his own pain. These are all faces of the same archetype, the necessary disguise that allows us to function in a world that rarely welcomes what is raw and real. Without this mask, we would be like children walking barefoot through fire, exposed to every demand, every opinion, every unseen expectation collective. Society asks us to present a digestible version of ourselves, one that won't disturb the order or challenge the norms. So we comply. We build a mask made of language, manners, smiles, and restraint. And we start believing that this is who we are. But the persona, Jung wrote in the ego and the unconscious, is a segment of the collective psyche, something that does not belong entirely to the individual. It's made of borrowed fabric, stitched together from convention, morality, and the approval of others. Think about that for a moment. How much of what you call you was crafted to protect you from rejection? How many times have you softened your truth so someone else could stay comfortable? How many versions of yourself have you invented to be loved? The agreeable one, the successful one, the spiritual one, the one who never offends, never needs, never breaks. Each role is a small surrender, a subtle bending of the soul, until one day, the bending turns into breaking, and you realize the face in the mirror is performing even when no one's watching. Jung understood that the persona was necessary, but only as long as we remember it's a mask, not a home. He compared it to clothing. It protects us, but if we never take it off, the body underneath forgets how to breathe. The danger arises when we identify too deeply with the role, when the actor becomes lost in the play. The mask begins to cling. The smile becomes automatic, the tone rehearsed. What once was a conscious adaptation turns into unconscious imprisonment. The person forgets that there's anyone behind the costume at all. And yet, there are moments when a hidden self pushes back. In the fatigue you can't explain, in the sadness that appears after the applause, in the quiet resentment of always being the good one. These are the whispers of the soul, reminding you that something essential is starving beneath the surface. The persona promises safety, but it demands silence in return. It trades authenticity for acceptance, spontaneity for structure. And in that trade, the spirit begins to shrink. The irony is that society rewards those who are best at pretending. The world doesn't see the mask as false. It sees it as polished. The one who adapts perfectly is called mature, disciplined, admirable. But inside, a quiet ache grows, the ache of someone who can no longer find their own reflection behind performance. The persona is not evil. It's simply incomplete. It's the outer shell of a much deeper truth that keeps knocking, asking to be seen. It wants to serve the self, not replace it. And when that balance is lost, when the outer mask begins to devour the inner life, the soul does what must survive. It begins to scream through symptoms: anxiety, emptiness, burnout. The strange sense that life is happening but you're not really in it. We think of Halloween as the night we choose our disguise. But for most of the year, it's the disguise that chooses us. We forget that we're the ones underneath, breathing through the cracks, waiting to be remembered. But what happens when the face behind the mask starts to scream? Beneath every carefully constructed persona lives something far less polite. A restless, waiting presence Jung called the shadow. It's everything you've ever pushed away. Every anger disguised as patience. Every envy hidden under politeness. Every desire labeled wrong and buried deep enough to make you appear good. The shadow is the basement of the psyche, the storage room of all you've denied. We like to think we've locked the door, that the light of self-control will keep it contained. But the unconscious doesn't forget. What the mind refuses to face, the body, the dreams, and the world around us will eventually reveal. We spend years constructing the perfect surface, only to be undone by the things we buried underneath it. The quiet resentment that erupts in an argument, the jealousy that seeps through compliments, the pride that hides behind our humility, the fear that dresses up as control. Jung saw this not as pathology, but as the natural consequence of repression. He wrote, "No one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Real growth, he believed, demands confrontation, not with the world, but with the hidden forces within us that shape how we see it. You can pretend for a while. You can master calmness, discipline, spirituality. But sooner or later, The parts of you that were exiled begin to stir. They speak through your irritations, through the people who trigger you, through the situations that repeat like mirrors. You meet your own darkness wearing someone else's face. The world becomes a screen where the rejected self plays its film. You call others selfish when you're starving for freedom. You label someone arrogant when you're secretly craving power. Projection, Jung said, is the shadow's favorite disguise. It's how it sneaks into the world while convincing you it isn't yours. And when you deny it long enough, the shadow grows teeth. It slips through cracks in your behavior, forcing itself into your life through the only door still open: crisis. The breakup you didn't expect, the rage you can't explain, the depression that swallows your motivation. These are not punishments. They're messages. The shadow doesn't attack to destroy you. It breaks through because it wants to be integrated. It's the forgotten self begging for a seat at the table. That's why Halloween feels so strangely liberating. It's the one night the collective shadow gets to breathe. Demons, witches, ghosts, vampires, ancient archetypes that symbolize everything we've been taught to repress. Desire, chaos, wildness, death, instinct. The masks that terrify us are also the ones that free us. For a few hours, the unconscious walks among us without shame. We laugh at what we fear. We dance with what we've denied. And though we call it play, something deeper stirs, a memory that what we hide from the world is often what connects us most to it. Still, the shadow is patient. It waits for the moment when you least expect it, when your persona is tired and thin, when the smile no longer holds. That's when it surfaces, not to punish, but to reclaim balance. Because wholeness, Jung believed, isn't found in perfection, but in the reconciliation of opposites. To face your darkness is not to lose yourself. It's to meet the rest of who you are. So maybe the monsters we fear are not warnings of evil, but invitations to wholeness. They remind us that no mask can silence what is true forever. And if you listen closely beneath the noise of the costume and the laughter, you might hear it. The shadow whispering your forgotten name. But what happens when the shadow takes control of the mask? When the mask stops being a choice and starts being your face, something in you begins to vanish. You wake up every day and play the same role. The reliable one, the strong one, the peaceful one, until even your emotions feel rehearsed. You no longer feel, you perform. You no longer live, you manage appearances. Jung warned that when the persona dominates completely, the individual enters a state of inner alienation. It's not that life loses meaning. It's that you lose access to the part of you that can feel it. The mask becomes glued to the skin. The applause becomes oxygen. Image replaces being. The vital energy that should flow freely between the conscious and the unconscious gets trapped in performance. What was once a bridge becomes a wall. Slowly, fatigue sets in, not the kind that sleep can fix, but the deep spiritual exhaustion of a life spent maintaining an illusion. You may still look successful, calm, loved, yet inside, something feels hollow. You scroll through social media, compare, perform, achieve, and still feel that haunting emptiness that no accomplishment can silence. That's the soul's quiet rebellion against imitation. Jung called this phenomenon the inflation of the ego, the moment when the individual confuses a mask with the self, when identity swells to fill every corner of consciousness, leaving no room for the deeper psyche to breathe. The persona, he wrote, is only a mask of the collective psyche, yet when we forget this, we become identical with our role and lose the ability to distinguish ourselves from the expectations of the crowd. The actor forgets he's in a play, believing the stage is the whole world. At first, it doesn't look like tragedy. The person seems confident, respected, admired, but something subtle has shifted. Life feels mechanical, relationships transactional, joy replaced by performance. The smile is polished but hollow, the laughter rehearsed. You start to feel watched even when you're alone, because the internal audience never leaves. What once protected you now demands constant maintenance. The mask, meant to save you from rejection, now keeps you from connection. And when the repressed self finally breaks through, it rarely knocks politely. The shadow bursts like a storm, through addiction, burnout, sudden anger, or emotional collapse. Jung observed that these crises aren't punishments, but messages. The psyche tried to restore balance by dismantling the lie. What's called breakdown is often the soul's desperate cry for authenticity. The pain, the anxiety, the sudden fall, all are invitations to remember what the mask has hidden. The collapse can be terrifying because it destroys the illusion of control. The persona begins to crack, and through those fractures, the repressed life force floods in. You might weep without knowing why. You might feel detached from everything that once seemed important. You might even grieve the identity that's dying. But Jung believed that such breakdowns are sacred thresholds, the point where the false self dissolves so that the real one can emerge. This confrontation between the mask and the face is not failure. It's alchemy. The two forces, the persona and the shadow, were never enemies, only opposites seeking union. The goal is not to destroy the mask, but to make it transparent, to let the soul shine through it instead of hiding behind it. When the light and the dark meet consciously, energy begins to flow again. You rediscover vitality not by escaping the darkness, but by walking through it. That's where the real transformation begins. The moment you stop pretending and start participating in your own truth, the performance ends and the healing starts. But what did Jung call this path of reconciliation? And why did he believe it begins precisely in the dark? Healing, Jung believed, was never about destroying the mask. It was about seeing through it. The persona, after all, was born from a sacred instinct, the need to belong, to protect the tender truth of who we are until it's strong enough to stand in the light. When we attack the mask, we repeat the same mistake, try to erase parts of ourselves rather than understand them. The real task is not annihilation but integration. Jung's path of individuation is not a war between light and shadow, but a dialogue between them. The process begins always with recognition. To heal, you first have to look honestly at the roles you've been playing and admit they're just that, roles. The professional who hides behind competence, the healer who hides behind kindness, the believer who hides behind certainty. You're not asked to judge these identities, only to recognize them as masks, necessary perhaps, but incomplete. The moment you can say, I've been playing this role, a subtle shift occurs inside you. The awareness itself begins to undo the spell. Because consciousness, Jung said, is like light. The moment you shine on something, it stops operating in the dark. Then comes the second movement, listening. The unconscious, that vast unseen realm within us, doesn't speak in words or logic. It speaks in symbols, dreams, slips of the tongue, synchronicities. The images that haunt your imagination are not random. The recurring dream that visits you year after year is not coincidence. They are the language of the soul, whispering from behind the curtain of rational thought. Jung called this symbolic communication the dialogue between the ego and the self. It is how the deeper psyche reaches out when reason can no longer guide you. To ignore these signs is to silence the voice of the divine within. Listening requires stillness, something rare in a world addicted to noise. It's in the silence that the unconscious rises, shy but persistent. The soul doesn't scream. It paints, it writes in metaphors. It hides meaning in everyday coincidences. When you begin to pay attention, life itself starts speaking back. Through the patterns you notice, the feelings that don't go away, the people who mirror exactly what you need to face. Jung called this mysterious communication synchronicity, and he saw it as evidence that the outer world reflects our inner state. To live consciously is to treat life as conversation, not coincidence. But awareness alone isn't enough. Individuation also demands action. The third step is embodiment. Living what you've learned, turning insight into behavior. It's not about rejecting the mask, but choosing when to wear it and when to set it down. The difference between imprisonment and mastery is awareness. When you consciously use a persona to express rather than suppress your truth, it becomes an instrument of connection instead of a shield of defense. You still play roles, teacher, parent, friend, but now you know there's something infinitely vaster behind them. The self begins to move through you rather than being hidden beneath you. Transformation, Jung insisted, is not glamorous. It isn't performance of light or a parade of affirmations. It's a painstaking, sacred craft, a handwork of the soul. It happens in quiet rooms, in journal pages, in therapy sessions, in the pauses between your old reactions and your new choices. It's a decision to stay present with discomfort instead of numbing it, to sit with confusion until it reveals its message. It's humility in motion, the courage to admit, I don't know who I am without the mask, but I'm willing to find out. He described this inner reconciliation as a transcendent function, the invisible bridge that unites the opposites within us. The transcendent function unites the opposites in a third way, one that is broader and more alive. Jung wrote in The Nature of the Psyche, it's not a compromise between light and darkness. It's the birth of a new consciousness that holds them both. Imagine a river meeting the sea. That merging is where transformation happens. The goal isn't to choose one over the other, but to learn to stand in the tension until something larger is born. That's why the work of integration can't be rushed. It unfolds like dawn, slowly, inevitably, illuminating what's been hidden. The bridge between persona and shadow is built in these small moments of courage, when you pause before reacting, when you listen before judging, when you choose to tell the truth even if your voice trembles. It's built in solitude and silence, in the long nights where you finally stop running from yourself. And in that stillness, something extraordinary happens. The energy once trapped in repression begins to move again. The parts of you that once fought each other start to collaborate. Your light deepens because it now includes your darkness. You no longer need to perform wholeness. You become it. You realize that what you feared as shadow was simply the half of your soul that had been waiting for a seat at the table. But even this sacred path holds hidden dangers, and the most insidious of them wears a mask of light. It's the trap Jung warned against, the moment when spirituality itself becomes another persona, the most seductive disguise of all. Not every light comes from God. Some are merely the ego dressed in gold. After confronting the shadow, many fall into what Jung called spiritual inflation, the subtle, seductive illusion of believing themselves healed, awakened, superior. The danger of the dark night is not only getting lost in the darkness, but mistaking the first flicker of dawn for the full sun. Jung warned that the ego, when exposed to divine symbols, can secretly crown itself king. It borrows the language of the soul to maintain its old power, speaking of transcendence while still orbiting around me. This is the trap of the holy persona. Another mask, but one that glows. It whispers, I'm beyond anger. I've transcended pain. I see what others cannot. Yet the moment you believe you're done with your inner work, that belief itself becomes your new shadow. The ego inflates like a balloon, floating above the earth it was meant to understand. It confuses light with height, forgetting that real illumination is not about rising above, but going deeper within. Then there's the opposite temptation, the isolation that hides behind introspection. After tasting the stillness of inner work, some begin to mistake solitude for superiority, silence for wisdom, distance for peace. They pull away from the world, claiming it's too noisy, too shallow, too unconscious. But Jung insisted that individuation is not withdrawal, it's participation. The self doesn't bloom in exile. It unfolds in relationship, in tension, in the friction of real life. Healing that doesn't touch the world remains unfinished. And perhaps the most subtle trap of all, the savior complex. The newly awakened heart feels an overwhelming urge to help others, to fix, to guide, to heal. But beneath that impulse can hide the old hunger for validation, the need to matter. We try to free others before freeing ourselves, forgetting that the greatest teaching is a life quietly lived in authenticity. The world doesn't need more rescuers. It needs more people who have learned to walk beside their own darkness without fear. Jung's psychology reminds us that genuine healing is humble. It moves slowly, rhythmically, like breath. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It grows quietly like dawn. The real sign of integration isn't that you stop feeling anger, sadness, or desire. It's that you can hold them without losing center. The enlightened one, Jung might say, is not the person without a shadow, but the one who no longer runs from it. Halloween, with all its ancient symbolism, carries the same wisdom. The night is long, but it's just a cycle. The masks fall when the light returns. The monsters fade not because they're destroyed, but because they've been seen. When morning comes, the mirror shows the same face, but the eyes are different. They've looked into the dark and found something precious there. Understanding. And when the light arrives, it doesn't burn away the night. It reveals what was hidden within it. That's the quiet miracle of this work. The realization that light and darkness were never enemies, only partners in your becoming. And it's here, at this fragile, luminous threshold, that true psychological rebirth begins. The moment when the human being finally comes home to themselves. At the end of the road, the individual discovers that there was never a real choice between the mask and the truth, because both belong to the same face. Each is a language of the soul, one spoken outwardly to survive, the other whispered inwardly to remain whole. When you finally understand this, you stop trying to destroy the persona and start to inhabit it consciously, like an actor who knows he's on stage but never forgets his own name when the curtain closes. Halloween fades. The lights dim, the laughter dissolves, and the masks return to their drawers. The streets, once filled with ghosts and shadows, fall silent again. Yet something has changed. Those who have dared to look at their own darkness no longer fear the night. They have learned what Jung meant when he said that life does not demand perfection, but wholeness. Os archetypos eo inconscient cultivo, page 120. Wholeness doesn't come from choosing one side of yourself. It comes from allowing both to exist in dialogue. The saint and the sinner, the light and the wound, the dreamer and the realist. This is a paradox of becoming real. Freedom isn't living without a mask, but knowing when to take it off. The awakened person doesn't discard their persona. They wear it lightly with awareness, as one wears clothing that can be removed when the body needs to breathe. They can move between worlds, the public and the private, the sacred and the ordinary, without losing the thread of who they are beneath it all. The journey of individuation, Jung taught, is not about ascending into some purified state. It's about descending into the tension of opposites, into the contradictions that make you human. It's about learning to dance with both your angels and your demons without denying either. The one who knows their darkness holds the light more humbly, more truthfully. Think of it like this. The soul is not a temple of glass meant to stay spotless. It's a cathedral of stained glass, fractured, colorful, illuminated from within. Each crack lets the light through in a different hue. That's what makes it beautiful. And when you stop trying to polish yourself into perfection, you begin to shine with the kind of authenticity that can't be imitated, the kind that is born only from having been broken open. As dawn rises after Halloween night, imagine walking through empty streets littered with forgotten masks. The wind carries a faint echo of laughter and fear, remnants of people who, for one evening, played at being what they secretly are. You realize the game was never about pretending to be monsters. It was about admitting we already are, and that's okay, because only by facing what's monstrous in us can we remember what's divine. Individuation is not a destination. It's a rhythm, an eternal conversation between the visible and the invisible. Some days you'll feel the mask tighten. Other days, it will fall away on its own. Both are sacred, because each moment of honesty, each time you choose truth over performance, silence over noise, presence over pretense, brings you closer to that still center where opposites meet and dissolve. So when the next cycle of darkness comes, don't run. Sit with it. Ask what it wants to show you. You might find that the face behind the mask has been waiting not to scare you, but to finally be loved. As the light returns, it doesn't destroy the night. It reveals it. Every shadow becomes a teacher. Every wound a window. The self you feared to meet becomes the source of your strength. That is a true rebirth Jung spoke of. The resurrection of the human being who can finally say, I am both the mask and the one who wears it. I am the darkness and the dawn. And maybe that's what Halloween was always trying to teach us, that the soul is neither light nor shadow, but the sacred space where both converge. Now it's your turn to look within. Comment below, I choose to see what I've hidden. And continue your journey by watching next episode, where we'll explore how the soul disguises itself as reason when it's afraid to feel.